Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're turning back the clock 300 years to see how the people of that era built a warm home from scratch on a land completely strange to them. Now dim the lights, and let's step into tonight's story together. You stand on the dock of a European port, about to board a ship bound for the New World. Beside you are a few wooden chests holding all your worldly possessions, a change of clothes, an axe, a saw, a few knives, just some seeds, and a wool blanket your mother insisted you take. The dock is crowded. Young men like you, families with children, priests, craftsmen, merchants, all carry a mix of fear of the unknown and hope for a new life in their eyes. You come from an ordinary European family. In the old world, every inch of land is claimed by nobles, by wealthy landowners. For a commoner like you, owning a plot of your own is all but impossible. But the New World is different. Here, there are vast stretches of unclaimed land, at least by European standards. The promise, if you have the courage to go and the strength to till it, the land is yours, draws thousands of Europeans across the Atlantic. Later generations will call these people pioneers, settlers, the backbone of North America's colonial era. Starting in the 17th century, they will transform the face of the North American continent forever. You clench your jaw and step aboard the ship, knowing you may never return. The hold is stifling, thick, with an unnameable stench, mildewed wood, human sweat, and the rot of food from the lower decks. You squeeze among strangers, listening to the ship creak and groan in the waves, silently praying it does not fall apart mid-voyage. A transatlantic crossing takes 6 to 10 weeks, depending on the wind and weather. Seasickness, disease, and hunger are constant companions. Records show the mortality rate on some ships reaches 20%. 1 in 5 never makes it to the other side. Somehow, you survive. The ship docks at a small harbor, and you stumble down the gangplank, legs wobbly, stomach churning. But you barely notice. You look up at this strange new land, a shabby settlement of a few dozen log cabins, a muddy street, a handful of shops, a church. It is far less grand than you imagined, but it is not your destination. Your home lies to the west, in the endless, untamed forest, where you will find your land and build your house. You spend a few days in the harbor settlement, restocking supplies and asking questions. Some tell you of an unexplored woodland 3 days' walk west, fertile soil, crisscrossed by rivers, perfect for settling. Others warn it is desolate. The nearest neighbor may be a dozen miles away, with no one to help if trouble comes. You weigh the risks and decide to go. You came here for one thing, land that is truly yours. The developed lands have long been claimed by others. What is left is either too expensive or too poor. Only deeper into the wild can you find your chance. You slung your few belongings over your shoulder and follow a local guide into the forest. The first step is a feeling you will never forget. Thick fallen leaves cushion your feet. Sunlight filters through the canopy in golden flecks, and the air smells of damp earth, decaying leaves, and a wild, untamed energy. This forest is nothing like the ones in Europe, carefully managed, with neat trees and winding paths. North America's old-growth forest is wild and raw, trees so thick it takes several men to wrap their arms around them, underbrush tall enough to block your sight, fallen logs and tangled vines everywhere. Within an hour, you are breathless and soaked in sweat. The guide glances back, grinning, and says, "You'll get used to it." For 3 days, you walk until your feet blister and your legs ache like lead. By day, you trudge forward. By night, you curl up under your blanket beneath the trees, listening to the hoot of owls, the howl of wolves in the distance, and the rustle of unknown creatures in the undergrowth. You try not to think about what made the sounds. Finally, on the evening of the 3rd day, the guide stops and points. "We're here." You push through the last thicket of bushes, and the world opens up, a small clearing, perhaps left by an ancient forest fire, or shaped by nature. A clear stream babbles at its edge, and rolling hills covered in dark green forest stretch into the distance. You stand there, staring, your heart a mix of awe and trepidation. This wild, empty place will be your home. The guide leaves after collecting his pay, clapping you on the shoulder and wishing you luck, and then you are alone. It is a moment every pioneer knows. The first time you face the wilderness alone, realizing everything from here on out depends on your own 2 hands. It terrifies some, it exhilarates others. You take a deep breath, scan your surroundings, and know you have little time. Winter is coming, and there is much to do before you can build a house. Choosing a building spot is the most critical first step. In the 18th century North American wilderness, a bad choice means more than just inconvenience. It can mean death. You assess the land with the little knowledge you have and the stories you heard from others, checking 5 key things. Water, the most important of all. You need to be close enough to water for drinking, cooking, washing, and watering a garden. No one wants a half-hour walk for a bucket of water, but not too close. Rivers and streams flood, especially when snow melts in spring or after storms. A house in a low-lying riverside spot could be swept away in a downpour. Experienced pioneers choose high ground near water-easy access. No flood risk. The small knoll beside the stream looks perfect. Orientation. A south-facing house gets the most sunlight, a lifeline in a world without electricity. It soaks up winter sun for warmth, and the high summer sun glides over the roof, keeping the inside cool. A free, natural air conditioner. The south side of the knoll is open, bathed in sunlight. Drainage. The land needs a gentle slope to let rainwater run off, not pool around the house. Soggy ground or a high water table rots foundations fast. You walk the knoll, testing the soil with your feet. It is dry with a slight tilt. Drainage will be fine. Wind. North American winters bring brutal northern winds. A house facing the north will let cold air whistle through every crack. The smart choice is to build behind a natural windbreak. A south-facing hillside, a stand of tall trees. The knoll's north side is lined with massive pine trees, a perfect wall against the cold. Building materials. Your house will be made from the trees around you, so you need quality wood close by. You look around straight. Strong hardwoods, oak, maple, beech, perfect for building. You mark the knoll as your building spot, thinking, this is where my home will stand. But the sun is sinking fast. And before you can lay a single log, you have a more urgent problem: where to sleep tonight. A house takes weeks, even months, to build, but night falls every single day. In this open wilderness, you must find a way to survive the nights first, before you can dream of building a home. The simplest shelter is a lean-to. Find 2 trees a few feet apart, prop a thick log between them. Then lean long branches against the log to form a sloped roof. Cover the branches with leaves, bark, or moss for a little waterproofing. It is crude, simple, and a single person can build it in a few hours. It will not keep out all the wind and rain, but it is better than sleeping under the open sky. You set to work, finding the log, cutting branches, gathering cover. Every task takes strength, and blisters burst on your hands, stinging raw. But you do not stop. The sun dips below the trees, painting the sky red. By the time you finish your shabby lean-to, it is pitch black. The wind rustles the leaves, an unknown animal calls in the dark, and wolves howl far away. Your heart pounds, but you whisper to yourself, it's okay. You're safe. You barely sleep a wink when sunlight filters through the branches and hits your face the next morning. You are shocked to find you drifted off for a few hours. You climb out of the lean-to, sore all over, but you are alive. That is all that matters. Now, the real work begins, building a sturdy, permanent house. And it all starts with cutting down trees. A decent log cabin needs 60 to 70 logs, each 8 to 12 inches in diameter, 15 to 20 feet long. That means felling 30 to 40 trees, and not just any trees. They must be straight, healthy, and free of too many knots. Crooked trees make useless walls. Diseased wood rots fast. Knotty logs are nearly impossible to work with. You also have to pick the right species. Oak is strong and durable, but so hard it can take a full day to fell a single large tree. Pine and spruce are softer, easier to cut, but they do not last as long. The perfect middle ground is white ash or American beech, strong enough, easy enough to work with, and perfectly straight. You walk the woods, marking the best trees, then lift your axe and swing it at the base of the first one. The first blow sends wood chips flying, and your arm vibrates with the impact. This tree is harder than you imagined. You adjust your stance and swing again and again. Your breath comes in gasps, sweat drips down your forehead, and your arm aches so badly it feels like it might break. The blisters on your palms split open, burning hot. You swing 50 times, 60 times, wondering if you picked the wrong tree. Finally, the trunk creaks, slowly tilting to one side. You sprint to safety, and the tree crashes to the ground, sending up a cloud of dust and leaves. You stand there gasping for air, soaked in sweat. That single tree took nearly 2 hours to fell. In that moment, you realize just how hard this work will be. Historians, studying the diaries and letters of the time, have pieced together the pioneer's struggle. A healthy adult man with an 18th century hand axe can fell only 3 or 4 medium trees a day. A massive old-growth tree can take 2 or 3 days, and felling is just the start. You have to trim the branches, cut the trunk to the right length, and drag the heavy logs to your building spot. Every step is back-breaking labor. Some pioneers use a trick called girdling. Strip a ring of bark from the trunk, killing the tree by cutting off its nutrient supply. A dead tree is lighter and easier to handle, but it takes a year or two to die, useless for anyone rushing to build a house before winter. Others use fire, piling dry wood around the roots and burning the tree to speed up its death. A technique learned from Native Americans who used it to clear vast swathes of land for farming. You wipe the sweat from your brow, stare at the fallen tree, and know this is only the beginning. Dozens more trees await. You lift your axe again. Weeks of felling and hauling pass, and finally you have enough logs. They stack neatly beside your building spot, a small mountain of wood. Now, it is time to turn these logs into a real house. The log cabin is an icon of the North American pioneer, an image that comes to mind when anyone thinks of the early settlers. A rough little cabin, a pioneer in homespun clothes standing in the doorway, axe in hand. But the log cabin is not an English invention. It was brought to North America in the mid-17th century by Swedish and Finnish immigrants who settled along the Delaware River, bringing with them the Scandinavian log building tradition. In Scandinavia, where forests are abundant and winters are cold, log cabins are practical. Wood is an excellent insulator. They require no nails, a precious commodity in the colonies, and one or two people can build them with no special tools or skills. The technique spread fast, adopted by German, Scottish, Irish, and English immigrants alike, and as they pushed west, the log cabin went with them across the entire North American continent. You decide to build a cabin 16 feet by 14 feet, about 20 square meters, the perfect size for a single person or a small family. Any smaller, and it is too cramped. Any larger, and you cannot build it alone. The first step is the foundation. You dig 4 holes, one for each corner of the cabin, and drop large stones into them. The stones lift the logs off the ground, slowing rot. If you had more time and strength, you could dig a shallow trench around the foundation for extra stability and moisture protection. But most pioneers rushing to finish before winter stick to the simple stone foundation. With the foundation laid, you start the first course of logs, the sill logs, the thickest, strongest logs you have, bearing the weight of the entire house. You lay 2 logs parallel on the stones, then 2 more perpendicular on top, crossing at the corners to form a square. That is the first layer. The third layer runs parallel to the first, the fourth to the second, and so on, stacking log upon log, each course crossing the one below at the corners for stability. It sounds easy, but the reality is far harder. The logs are impossibly heavy. A 15-foot, 10-inch log can weigh 300 to 400 pounds. So you build a ramp, sloping from the ground up to the walls you have laid. Tie a rope around the log and drag it up the ramp, inch by inch. It is slow, tiring work, and dangerous. If the rope breaks or your foot slips, the log will roll down and it could kill you. You stack the logs, course by course, and the walls rise, slowly but surely. Every evening, you step back and look at what you have built, and a strange sense of pride swells in your chest. This is no longer just a pile of wood. It is your home, taking shape. But how do you hold the logs together? The answer is joinery, carving notches in the ends of the logs, so they lock into the logs below, like giant wooden building blocks, each weighing hundreds of pounds. There are a few different notch styles, each with pros and cons. The saddle notch, the simplest, carved with just an axe. A semicircular groove is cut in the bottom of a log, fitting perfectly over the log below. Easy to make, but the upward-facing groove traps rainwater, leading to rot. The reverse saddle notch, the groove is cut in the top of the log, so rainwater runs off. Better for durability, a little more work to carve. The dovetail notch, shaped like a swallow's tail wide at both ends, narrow in the middle, locking the logs tight together. Incredibly strong, but it requires precise measuring and cutting, a skill only professional carpenters master. The half dovetail notch, faster to carve than a full dovetail, but not quite as strong. As a new pioneer, you choose the simple saddle notch. You roll the log onto the walls, prop it in place, trace the outline of the log below onto it, then chop the groove with your axe. If you are careful, the groove fits perfectly. If not, there are small gaps, but you can fill those later. You repeat this process for both ends of every log, twice for each of the 4 logs in every course. A single log cabin requires hundreds of notches, each one measured, traced, chopped. Finally, the last notch is cut and the walls stand. They are rough, with gaps between the logs and no roof, but it looks like a house. You walk up to the walls, run your hand along the logs and stare at the countless gaps. Logs are round, and no matter how perfect your notch is, there will always be spaces that let in wind, rain, spaces that will turn the cabin into a freezing nightmare in winter. You need to chink those gaps. Chinking is the only way to seal the gaps between the logs. You start with the big spaces, shoving in small sticks and wood shavings to fill the void. For the smaller gaps, you use moss or fine wood chips, packing them as tight as you can. Then you cover it all with mud. You dig clay from the stream bank, mix it with water to make a thick paste, and add hay or animal hair to bind it together. You slather this mud mixture over the packed chinking, smoothing it as best you can. When the mud dries, it hardens, creating a mostly airtight seal. But mud has a flaw. It cracks. As the seasons change, the logs expand and contract with the heat and cold, and the mud cracks and falls off. You will have to re-chink the cabin nearly every year. Some pioneers add lime to the mud for extra durability. It makes the surface harder, less likely to crack. But lime is hard to find in the remote wilderness. You spend days chinking every gap in the cabin walls. When you finish, you step back and look at your work. It is ugly, mud smudged unevenly, streaked with different colors, already cracking in places. But you put your hand to the wall, and there is no wind whistling through the gaps. That is all that matters. The walls are done, but the cabin is still incomplete. You look up, and the top is open to the sky. Now, you need a roof. But first, the most important part of the cabin, the fireplace and chimney. In all the steps of building a cabin, The fireplace and chimney are the most critical. You can live without furniture, without windows, even without a proper floor. But you cannot live without a fireplace in 18th century North America. The fireplace is more than just a heater. It is the center of family life. You cook over it, warm yourself by it, light your cabin with its glow, and gather around it to talk, tell stories, teach your children to read. It is the heart of the home. A badly built fireplace means you will not survive the first winter. North American winters are brutal, especially in the north. Temperatures drop to 20 or 30 degrees below zero. Blizzards rage for days on end. In a world without central heating or electricity, a good fireplace is the line between life and death. Building a fireplace is no easy task. The ideal fireplace is stone. Cut a large hole in one cabin wall. Stack stones to make a recessed firebox, and build a chimney up through the roof. Stone fireplaces are strong, durable, and fireproof. But they require tons of stone, lime for mortar, and masonry skills most pioneers do not have. For those without stone or skills, there is a simpler alternative, a log and mud fireplace. You build a frame of logs, shaping a recessed firebox and a chimney that rises above the cabin walls. Then, you coat the entire inside of the frame with a thick layer of mud or clay, at least a few inches thick, creating a fireproof barrier. This mud layer is critical. It keeps the flames from touching the logs, and you must check it constantly for cracks, patching them as soon as you find them to prevent fires. You spend days building your fireplace, and when it is done, you light the first fire. Flames leap up, smoke curls up the chimney and into the sky, and warmth spreads through the cabin. You sit by the fire, feeling the heat wrap around you, and a deep sense of contentment washes over you. This is what home feels like. It is a wild, empty place, a rough little cabin. But with fire, it is home, with the walls up and the fireplace burning. It is time to build the roof. A good roof has to do 4 things. Keep out rain. North American summers bring violent storms. Leaky roofs turn cabins into puddles. Hold back snow. Heavy winter snow can collapse a weak roof. Insulate the cabin. Hot air rises, and a bad roof lets all your precious heat escape and have the right slope. Too flat, and water and snow pile up. Too steep, and it is hard to build and maintain. Designing and building a roof is a skill in itself. The simplest roof is a single slope, a shed roof. Make one wall a few courses higher than the other. Lay beams across the top and cover them with roofing material. Easy to build, but it only drains on one side. Snow and water pile up on the low side, and it is not the most attractive. The more common choice is a gable roof, the classic A-frame, with 2 sloped sides meeting at a ridge in the middle. Rain and snow slide off both sides, making it far more practical. Building a gable roof takes more work. First, you build gable walls, triangular extensions, on the 2 short ends of the cabin to support the ridge. Then lay a ridge beam across the gables and attach rafters from the ridge beam to the cabin walls, forming the sloped roof frame. It is more complex than a shed roof, but it works so much better. Once the frame is done, you need to cover it. The most common roofing material for pioneers is wood shingles, thin slices of wood laid like fish scales, one overlapping the next to keep rain out. Shingles are made from wood that splits easily: white ash, cedar, or yellow pine. You split the wood into thin shingles, about 1/2 inch thick, 6 inches wide, and 2 feet long. When laying them, you make sure each upper shingle covers the gaps of the one below, leaving only 1/3 of the lower shingle exposed. A single small cabin roof needs thousands of shingles, and splitting and laying them takes days of work. If you have no time for shingles or no good splitting wood, there are other options. Bark. Large sheets of bark from elm or birch trees laid directly on the roof. It is waterproof, but not as durable as shingles. Thatch, straw, or reeds. A roofing staple in Europe, but rare in North America, since the materials are hard to find and thatch is a fire hazard. Earthen roof. A layer of sod on top of planks or branches, covered with dirt. It is an excellent insulator and completely fireproof, but it is extremely heavy, requiring a much stronger roof frame, and can leak muddy water in heavy rain. You choose wood shingles. You have plenty of wood after all. You spend days splitting shingles, then days laying them. And finally, the roof is done. You step back and look at your cabin. 4 walls, a fireplace, a roof. It is rough. It is simple, but it is a house. When it rains, you will not get wet. When it snows, you will be sheltered. You walk inside, and for the first time, it feels like a place to live. You step inside the cabin and look down. The floor is just bare dirt, untouched, unworked earth. In the 18th century, most pioneer cabins start with dirt floors, and they have their merits. They cost nothing, and dirt is a natural insulator, keeping the cabin a little warmer in winter. But the flaws are obvious. If the roof leaks or you track in wet mud on your boots, the floor turns to slop. When it is dry, it is covered in dust that no amount of sweeping can get rid of, and it is a haven for bugs, ants, cockroaches, even mice burrowing up from the ground. As soon as they can, most pioneers upgrade their floors. The most common upgrade is a wooden floor, with a few options: half log floor, logs split in half, flat side up, laid side by side. Rough, but far better than dirt, though the surface is uneven and there are gaps between the logs. Plank floor, logs sawn into thick planks, laid flat, smooth, sturdy, and clean. But hand sawing a single plank takes a full day, making it a luxury for only the most skilled or patient pioneers. Brick or stone floor. Bricks are common near brick kilns, neat and easy to clean. Stone floors depend on local geology, using slate or other flat stones if they are available. Winter is too close to build a wooden floor, so you stick with dirt for now, but you lay a few flat stones in front of the fireplace, so that spot at least stays dry and clean. Next year you tell yourself, when I have time after the harvest, I'll build a proper wooden floor. The cabin has walls, a roof, a fireplace, and a dirt floor. But it is missing one crucial thing: a door. You left a hole in one wall for an entrance. But an open hole is a problem. Wind whistles through it, undoing all your work, chinking the walls. Wild animals, raccoons, squirrels, stray dogs, even bears see the cabin as a giant food cabinet, full of temptation, and there is safety. Your nearest neighbor is miles away, but the wilderness has drifters, outlaws, and strangers with ill intent. You need a door. Building a simple door is not hard. You take a few planks, split from logs or half logs, lay them side by side, and fasten them with 2 crossbeams. You carve holes in the planks, drive in wooden pegs, and it holds no nails needed, though nails would work better. Some pioneers tie planks together with leather strips, making a floppy but functional door. You find a strong strip of leather, nail one end to the door frame, the other to the door, and it swings open and shut like a book. Leather hinges are not as durable as metal ones. There is a more primitive option, wooden pivot hinges, carving pegs on the top and bottom of the door that fit into holes in the frame. No metal, no leather, but it is hard to install, and the door wiggles loose over time. With the door on its hinges, you need a way to lock it. The simplest lock is a wooden bar, 2 brackets on either side of the door, a thick stick laid across them, holding the door shut. No one can push it open from the outside. The cabin is starting to look like a real home, but it has no windows. Windows need glass, and glass in the 18th century is an outrageously expensive luxury, far beyond the reach of ordinary pioneers. You light the cabin with the fireplace and the open door. Keep the door open during the day for sunlight. Light a candle or oil lamp at night, if you can afford it. If you crave a little more natural light, you can cut a small hole in the wall and cover it with oiled paper or cloth. The oil makes it semi-transparent, letting in a little light while keeping out the wind and rain. Real glass windows are a dream for the future, a luxury you add only when you expand and upgrade the cabin years later. You hang the door, test it, push it open, pull it shut, slide the wooden bar in place. It creaks. There are gaps around the edges, but it works. It keeps the wind out. It keeps the animals out. It keeps you safe. That is all that matters. You step inside the cabin, door shut and barred, and look around. It is empty nothing but bare walls, a dirt floor, and a fireplace. No bed to sleep in, no table to eat at, no place to set your things. You have to build furniture from scratch with your own 2 hands. You start with the most important piece, a bed. In one corner of the cabin, you carve 2 holes in each of 2 adjacent walls. Slide thick logs into the holes for support, and lay planks or a rope net across them to make a platform. You pile hay or leaves on the platform, cover it with your wool blanket, and that is your bed. No headboard, no frame, no mattress, just a flat place to lie down. Is it comfortable? Not really, but it is far better than sleeping on the cold dirt floor. If you wanted a better bed, you could build a freestanding frame with 4 legs, held together with joinery, with sawn planks for the bed base. But that takes more woodworking skill, more materials, and days of work for a single pioneer. It is a luxury. Most start with a wall platform, upgrading only when they have time and energy. Next, a table. You need a flat surface for eating, working, setting your things. The simplest table is a single plank laid across two wooden stumps. It is wobbly, bumped, and it tilts, but it works. A nicer table has 4 legs, joined to the top with pegs or notches, but that takes more skill. Then seating. Chairs are complex. They have to hold a person's weight and be stable. The simplest seat is a 3-legged stool, a wooden top with 3 holes, 3 sticks hammered in for legs. 3 legs never wobble, even on the uneven dirt floor, and it takes minutes to build. Most pioneer cabins have no chairs at all. People sit on the bed, on wooden chests, or just on the floor. Chairs are a luxury, not a necessity. You spend a few days building your furniture, a wall bed, a wobbly plank table, 2 3-legged stools. It is all rough, uneven, covered in axe marks, but it is functional. You sit on one stool, your hands resting on the table, the fireplace crackling beside you, the bed in the corner, and for the first time the cabin feels warm. It feels like home. You live in your cabin now, warm and sheltered, but you quickly learn a hard truth. The wilderness is no place for a lone person. What if you get sick? What if you break a bone? What if you need to move a log too heavy for one person to lift? This is where neighbors come in. And in the wilderness, a neighbor is anyone within a dozen miles, because who else can you turn to? North American pioneers developed a unique tradition of community help called a barn raising. And it is not just for barns. When a family needs to build a large structure, a barn, a new cabin, a church, a school, something too big for one family to build alone, they invite every neighbor for miles around. Dozens of people, men, women, and children, show up, and in a single day or two, they build the structure from scratch. The family hosting provides a feast: roast meat, bread, vegetables, and plenty of beer or cider. It is not just about work. It is a social event. In the vast wilderness, people live far apart, and they rarely see each other. A barn raising is a chance to catch up, share news, laugh, and connect. Young people meet potential spouses, families strengthen bonds. It is an unwritten social contract. I help you build your barn today. You help me build my cabin tomorrow. No one keeps score. No one owes anyone anything. Everyone relies on each other. This tradition is the foundation of pioneer communities. It is not forced by the government or the church. It is born from necessity, from the simple truth that no one can survive the wilderness alone. You join a few barn raisings for your distant neighbors, and when you need to build a small shed for livestock, you invite them to your place. On those days, as you work side by side with other pioneers, laughing and talking as you hammer and haul, you feel it for the first time. The wilderness is not lonely anymore. You have neighbors. They live miles away, but they are your people, your allies, your friends, the ones you can count on. That feeling, that connection, is what turns a cabin in the woods into a home. More than any log, any mud, any shingle. A year passes. Your cabin still stands on the knoll beside the stream, but it is not the same shabby, drafty shelter you built that first winter. You have patched the mud chinking a dozen times, smoothing it until the walls look almost neat. You built a proper door, solid and straight, and traded a basket of potatoes with a neighbor for a real iron latch to lock it. The roof shingles lost a few in summer storms and winter snow, but you patched them fast, and the roof does not leak anymore. The fireplace is still the same, but you added a small oven beside it, so you can bake bread now. The floor is still dirt, but you have been stacking planks in the corner, saving them for the wooden floor you will build after the harvest. Your wall bed has a soft sod mattress now, instead of just hay and leaves, and it is far more comfortable. The wobbly table and stools are still there, but you built a wooden shelf for your things and a small chest to store your clothes. Outside the cabin, you cleared a small garden plot where you grow corn, beans, and pumpkins. You have a few chickens clucking and scratching in the yard every day, laying eggs for breakfast. You know your neighbors now, the family 5 miles west, the old trapper 3 miles east, and you stop to chat when you pass each other on the forest paths or visit for a cup of cider on cold evenings. You even find yourself daydreaming about expanding the cabin, adding a second room, or building a whole new, larger house on the knoll. It all started a year ago, with you standing in that empty clearing, nothing but an axe and a wool blanket to your name. Now, you have a home. It is not a grand manor, not a comfortable villa. By modern standards, it is laughably simple, even shabby. But it is yours. You cut every log with your own axe, stacked every course with your own hands, chinked every gap with your own sweat. You know every inch of this cabin, every log, every shingle, because you built it. That is a feeling no board house can ever give you. You are just an ordinary person with an ordinary life. But you have a plot of land that is truly yours, and a home you built from scratch in the wilderness. A warm, safe place to live, a place to call your own. Shh.